Welcome to the Brainstorm episode 45, and we're giving the people what they want today, and that is Tesla with Tasha. Tasha, you've been doing a ton of research on autonomous vehicles over the past 10 years, and now it sounds like people are finally open to hearing with the implications. So why don't you take us through what happened on Tesla's earnings call and what changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's finally it's in the spotlight now more than it ever has been in the past, but I still don't see a ton of sell side analysis taking it seriously, I'd say. But yeah, what's different now is on this recent earnings call, I'd say that Robotaxi's got a spotlight in a way that they have not before. So Tesla previewed what the ride-hailing app could look like in the report that they published online. It's like a mock-up of what that app could look like. So they talked about sort of a mix between cars owned by Tesla versus, owned by Tesla owners. They didn't mention fleet owners, but I think that's how this will scale, is other companies will own fleets of Tesla vehicles, or maybe other company, depending. But, to zoom out, why do we think that this is such a big deal? Well, the price target that we published for Tesla for 2027, that we're currently updating now, $2,000 per share. In that analysis, we thought that roughly 2/3 of the enterprise value could be attributable to robotaxis. And it's because this is a business that will have recurring revenues, and it will also have margins, we think, that are much higher than the base vehicle business. So I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to the event in August. I can't wait to see, what other tidbits they unveil. They gave us the app. What are we seeing next? And it feels like, certainly from a software update perspective, that those are actually happening at a faster clip now as well. And Tesla said so. So every couple of weeks, we're getting a meaningful update to full self-driving, or FSD. I feel the difference. So I'm looking forward to that day when, my car becomes a fully autonomous car.
And China, what just happened there as well? And because that's a difference from our model, I believe, that we published last year, right?
Well, so the news is that Tesla, might have gotten approval in China for full self-driving. So I guess to your point, last year, they didn't have that approval. So, full self-driving right now has really just been active in the US. It doesn't exist in Europe or other markets, including China. This announcement is a big deal because China is very protective of their video data, their mapping data. I think that's why we see Tesla partnering with a local mapping provider, although, of course, it just makes sense. They use Google Maps and other sources here, so why wouldn't they use a local source there? But as you know, Sam, and all the work that you've done on electric, the auto market's something that really matters to China. So to let a foreign player come in on autonomy, I think is something that's, not to be looked over. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I think there's also interesting speculation happening, right? On the earnings call, they also mentioned that they're in talks with someone to lease the FSD technology. And I think there's a lot of speculation that is Ford, just based on what they've done with the North American charging standard, how quick they were to adopt that, some of the back and forth on Twitter. And now there are people out there on Twitter saying, maybe BYD should be interested in this because, they've publicly said they're not too optimistic on autonomous vehicles, but they're certainly making compelling low-cost electric vehicles.
Yeah, and I think, if I were to create a list of the other automakers and how that, other automakers that are meaningfully far along on autonomy, it'd be a really short list. So in other words, there's a very long list of potential automakers that can and maybe should partner with Tesla on this technology, because otherwise, how are they going to get access to it? So yes, Ford, they had an internal effort, Argo AI, that's no more. BYD was working with Baidu, and then last year they switched away from that. They said, no, we're going to do some internal features. As you've said, they've said how difficult that this technology can be publicly. So I mean, I think any one of those would be a really exciting development. I think while I'm optimistic that other automakers could license this at some point in the future, I think it's just for a traditional automaker to really throw in the towel and say, yeah, I'm not good at technology. I'm gonna look to Tesla. That's a really big deal, and I think so. I wouldn't be surprised if that decision is delayed, if this doesn't have a meaningful impact in Tesla's value over the next 5 years. Although that's not to say that it's not coming, right?
Yeah, and then Tasha, maybe this would be good. This was asked by some people in the Brainstorm on Friday as well, and I'm sure those who've been following your research know this incredibly well. But for everyone else, maybe in as simple terms as possible, what are the fundamental difference in business model and economics of selling just an electric vehicle versus selling an autonomous electric vehicle?
Okay, so assuming that a Model 3 today cost about $40,000, Tesla's getting single-digit thousands in operating profit off of that vehicle from a one-time sale. In a Robotaxi network, you get a meaningful recurring revenue stream. So that same Model 3, let's say it's going 100,000 miles per year. It's charging customers just $1 per mile. That's a lot cheaper than Uber and Lyft, thanks to a much higher utilization rate on an autonomous taxi. And then you're getting $100,000 in recurring revenue off of that car versus just, the initial $40,000 sale. We also think that this model could actually have more attractive margins, as I said. So, we're talking double-digit thousands in operating profit per car per year versus that one time again. So, this is why we think that Robotaxis could be 2/3 of the enterprise value of Tesla in the next 5 years. And as I say that, look out for our upcoming valuation model on Tesla. That should be out soon.
All right, Nick, you're our Threads user, our resident look into Tesla Q and what's going on. Why is there reason to doubt here?
Well, I want to ask the question to both of you. What do you think are some of the major hurdles to rolling out a robo-taxi network? Obviously, it's not as easy as just flipping on a switch and now everyone that has FSD capability can allow their car to go out on the road. So what exactly do you think are some of those hurdles that are not being talked about?
Yep. Tasha, you kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest hurdle really is solving for full autonomy. So I mean, making the car work in enough corner cases such that you can actually take a person out of the front seat. That is by far, the hardest step to cross. And Tesla hasn't gotten there yet. Although we are seeing pretty positive signs. I mean, a lot of the videos that are being posted online for the current versions of FSD show, nearly full drives, in some cases full drives, where the owner's not touching the wheel at all. So I think that if they wanted to, there's certain areas in the US like California where it works really well today, where they could launch. Then, a lot of people might say, well, regulatory hurdles those are a big deal. And not that regulation isn't something to think about. I think it is. It absolutely is. I actually think there's like a skew in how people view the regulation of autonomous cars because most of the activity has already happened in California or happened in California first. Because this state actually has more hurdles to pass than other states. So, and I'm talking like, okay, well, you get approval to launch a service, then you get approval to charge for a service. You might have to, we've seen Cruise and Waymo do some initial geographic area, then they need approval to expand. I don't think the process will work the same in every state, so I think it could be simpler. And we already do have quite a number of states that have either regulation that doesn't explicitly exclude autonomy or actually, favors it and has language that is friendly to autonomy. I believe it's about roughly half of states have that. So actually don't think that regulation is as big of a deal as many make it out to be. I think it's really the technology.
And even on that, I would say it lends itself to Tesla's strength in the amount of data it has and proving that it's statistically significant with respect to being safer than a human.
I guess one other question here. When we talk about utilization, you mentioned that these should have significantly higher utilization than passenger vehicles and even Uber. What does Waymo look like on a utilization basis? And then I have maybe a more narrow edge case or just a potential hurdle that maybe is short-term thinking, but I'm just trying to think through some of the obstacles I see. But I'm curious on the utilization.
Yeah, Waymo really doesn't provide transparency into that kind of statistic. But here's the thing that I'd say that's important to know about Waymo. The last update that we got from them is that they have hundreds of vehicles on the road. Now, if you have ride hail going in 2 separate cities and you have hundreds of vehicles, not thousands, I would guess, that it's actually hard to bootstrap a network because, if you're Uber in New York City, you have, tens of thousands of cars, right? So just on that basis alone, I would say that, it wouldn't surprise me if it was on the lower end. I could imagine that Waymo might have lower utilization than a taxi. But the thing is, we really don't know. Mm-hmm. A taxi in New York City today gets about a 30% utilization rate. The average passenger car, less than 5% of the day. So, we estimate that an autonomous vehicle could get north of 50. I don't think it's a far stretch to say that an autonomous vehicle will be a lot more efficient than a human-driven cab driver today.
And also, Tasha, adding on to what you're saying, Waymo's not even cheaper than an Uber or Lyft, right?
No.
So it's like you're using it for novelty and you're not saving money. So you can imagine that if both of those are flipped, then there's the answer on whether or not there will be demand. All right, Nick, let's hear the real. You really. I have. Just say it. Say it. What?
Okay. Devil's advocate. Where we've reached full self-driving capability. Tesla now allows me as an individual to, use my car as a robotaxi. One, curious, and I'm sure there are very clever solutions to all of this and probably solutions that have already been built. One is, what does my insurance policy now look like? I assume it's going to be a large step up. That's an additional cost to me as now an operator. The second is, how exactly does this car charge? It's not charging itself. Does Tesla now employ charging attendants? Do I have to be home when this comes back to my garage, which it doesn't have the capability to get into on its own? How exactly does that work? Or how would you think they could solve for it?
So starting backwards on charging, in the past, there's been, talk of a robotic snake charger. So first I'd say, if your car, so it's not, you could leave your garage open. You can imagine it where it's the app takes care of a lot for you. So it's I sign my car up and I say, I want it to be on the network from, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I know the car's coming back at 5. So I'm careful to open my garage door then, or maybe it just, kind of waits around until the garage door is open, which wouldn't really be the end of the world. Also, I think our insurance rates today are higher for ride-hail platforms. You can imagine that in this type of business, which is already how ride-hail works, if you are driving the car for business purposes versus personal purposes, that's when that ride-hail insurance program kicks in. So I think it'd be the same here. Of course, Tesla has their own insurance program. It's not available in every state. If they didn't have it up and running, they could use an insurance partner. If they did have it up and running in that particular state, they could do their own insurance policy there.
My other question is on adoption rates. Assuming that not everyone signs up to have their vehicle go around and become a robotaxi, what exactly are we expecting?
Yeah, I think, and I wanted to say this on your last question, a really important distinction to make here is that our expectations for robotaxi scaling are not dependent on individual owners signing up their vehicles. I would expect for this to scale. You're having, likely another company that buys fleets of Teslas to own and operate them. So it's more like one big fleet working together as dedicated business vehicles, not owned by individuals, versus people signing their vehicle up. I think it's definitely possible people could sign their vehicle up, and we could look at the FSD subscribers and some fraction of them. So Elon said there's 1.8 million people that have access to FSD now. Roughly half of them are using it, and then I would assume some fraction of those people would be willing to sign their vehicles up. But I think the way that this works is more like a fleet business model in the future.
And Nick, you like to point out the inventory numbers that get thrown out there. Imagine if all of a sudden there's no inventory, but a fleet of vehicles all deployed to a single city.
Yep, that's definitely possible.
Yeah, and I think, again, like to your point on utilization, to really kickstart a service, and Tesla might do this with their own fleet at first. You want to concentrate vehicles in one area. So that would be like another reason that you wouldn't just want to rely on users.
Right. You want density so that you can compete on delivering service. That makes sense.
Tasha, I think an important last question here is, are we switching nomenclature from Robotaxi to Cybercab?
Yeah, it's the first time we heard them. So what do you think of that term, Cybercab? Because, originally we were thinking, this car could like be some iteration of like the design that they chose for the Cybertruck. And then when they continued to talk about it, it didn't, and we heard the issues with manufacturing the Cybertruck. It seemed like, well, maybe they won't go down that route. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I think if Cybertruck was mass scalable, it would make sense, right? You don't have to paint it. So there's no like emissions limit on the number you can produce. I've seen some of the fender benders of cars running into the Cybertruck, and you really can't tell that the Cybertruck has been in an accident. So, if you could scale that technology, I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to do that. I think from what we've seen, there's, it's a new technology, so it's difficult, and it's unclear if that's fundamental to that design or if it's just early days. I think my gut right now is just saying that cyber is relative to styling, but I'm still holding out that they solve the stainless steel manufacturing and we can have a ton of true cyber stainless steel cabs running around. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like a catchy phrase either way. So I like that there. It's like it gets you thinking. It's like another thing to get people speculating on, sparking interest in the platform itself. So I like it for that reason. Yeah, but I like you would kind of wait. It's like, okay, well, what they are pulling design elements? I'd be curious what they are, just given what we've heard about the process.
Okay, and then the most important, you guys both have a good connection on go. I want you to say the year that you think the cyber taxi network launches.
In what type of rollout?
In commercial, it just starts commercially. People are paying for rides.
At scale?
No.
No. It starts. This is the launch.
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
26.
2025.
Oh, look at that.
Nick, you're up.
Well, okay. So
now a big conversation comes in.
let me clarify. I think you will see maybe even late 25 a rollout in limited scope of the Cybercab network in the same way that you have Waymo and SF. I think that's what you'll see, but I don't think you're going to see a national scaled Cybercab network until 2030. I think there's a lot of hurdles there to roll it out nationwide. So that's probably where I differ.
Yeah, I mean, sure, certainly like next 5 years for scale, sometime in that time period kind of is what I would expect. I mean, it depends on what you consider scale as well, but I think that's possible. Yeah, I agree with you that it's like Waymo and Cruise have shown us that the minimum viable product seems possible sooner rather than later. I think it will look different than Waymo just because they already have more scale. I mean, it could be nearly, but I think, there's no reason, given that Tesla has decided to do a more dynamic approach to autonomy and that they're, a fully verticalized manufacturer that's prioritizing this. I'm more optimistic for it to look different than those platforms. But
all right, Tasha, thank you for joining us. Everyone, go read her past 5+ years of research. All the questions we hear people asking, Tasha's done extensive modeling on. So don't be afraid to dig up those old papers.
Sam, I think you have to answer this question as well.
In what year I think they commercially launch?
Yes.
I'm going start of 26.
That seems fair. I think we have to come back on after the August 8th delivery event or the event and reassess.
All right, I'm in.
Yeah.
That's right. Maybe it starts 8/7. Maybe that's how we get there.
Maybe.
All right.
We'll see.
All right.
See everyone next week.
Thanks for having me on.